Hello, this is Psych Central's Ask the Therapist, and I'm Dr. Marie Hartwell-Walker, and
this is Dr. Dan Tomasulo.
You know, Dan, one of the most inspiring stories I heard in the past year didn't come from one of my psychology books. It actually came from the Ellen show. We get our material where we can, and Michael J. Fox was the guest.
Yeah.
And he was talking about that he really gets kind of annoyed that people see his life as less than it could be because, he, as you probably know, he's been dealing with Parkinson's disease for 20 years.
Right.
And he said, you know, it's all about keeping things in perspective. So I want to share the story I tell my children.
Right.
When my children start complaining about something, I say, well, a woman had a baby in a tree. And Ellen says, well, what does that mean? He said, well, here's the story. A woman in a developing country went into labor when her village was being flooded by the river overflowing its banks. And to save herself and her baby, she climbed a tree and gave birth in the tree. And he said, so I say to my kids, a woman had a baby in a tree. What do you got? You know? And he says, okay, I've got Parkinson's.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing I have to deal with. But a lady had a baby in a tree, so what have I got?
Yes,
and and Ellen said, well, how can you, you know, how about what's the most positive thing in your life, given everything that's happened to you? And he said, right now.
Yeah, sure.
And she said, what do you mean? And he said, having a lovely conversation with a very funny person.
Yeah.
And, you know, life is good.
Right.
So I think there's a lesson there for all of us in terms of perspective, that he has made a kind of mantra for himself of, here's what's really bad.
Right.
So I can deal with this.
Yes.
You know? And how can we help other people maybe get a little bit of that?
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's a couple of things about his story that is so inspiring. I remember when I read Lucky Man, right? And oh my goodness, so powerful about this perspective. And I think there were really two ways to do this. You know, one is you can look at others' situation and say, you know, wow, that they really went through something. I'm not going through that. But the other way, which I think is equally as powerful, is to identify the gratitudes that are in your life, not even comparing yourself to others. And that can be as simple as a daily gratitude review. You take the last 24 hours and you think about those 24 hours with respect to what you have gratitude for. And as you start to do that review, maybe a day that wasn't so good all of a sudden starts to feel better and sound better. And the thing I like about that kind of gratitude is that gratitude has the power to warp time. When you think about the past in a different way, it changes how you feel about it. And then as you're doing that, it changes how you feel in this moment. And then we know for the next 2 weeks, you're likely to have a more optimistic attitude. So it changes the past, the present, and the future.
I think the one thing I would add to that is if people look for big things to be grateful for, then it's self-defeating. Like if I'm only going to be grateful if I win the lottery, or the man of my dreams shows up on horseback, it's not going to do it. But to think about, hey, I'm lucky enough to have a toothbrush. I'm lucky enough to be able to take a hot shower. I can be grateful that I had something to eat today. Those little things aren't so little when you add them all up.
Absolutely.